War may be hell, but sometimes it smells like pepperoni. Forget spy satellites, intercepted communiques, and top-secret intelligence briefings. According to a growing number of DC watchers, the most bizarrely reliable way to predict whether the US is about to go to war is to track pizza deliveries near the Pentagon. It sounds ridiculous until you look at the history. For decades, late-night pizza orders have mysteriously surged just before some of America's biggest military operations, from Grenada to Desert Storm to airstrikes in the Middle East, and now in 2025. A strange little metric called the Pentagon Pizza Index is making headlines again, because it may have just predicted Israel's massive strike on Iran. So is this just coincidence, or a legitimate, greasy breadcrumb trail to America's next war? Let's dig into the strangest military signal you've never heard of, and why it might actually work. For military officers, particularly those in the nation about to be attacked, any knowledge of when the first strikes might happen can make a huge difference in how the rest of the battle plays out. Taking precautionary action or even launching a preemptive strike can change the outcome of the conflict. That's why war plans are such closely guarded secrets, and finding out about them in advance has required the skills of espionage and other intelligence operations. But wars also tend to shake financial markets and disrupt domestic and international trade. So advanced knowledge of when hostilities are about to commence is also vital information for hedge funds, traders, importer-exporters, and other financial players. And needless to say, a heads up that your city is about to be bombarded can also be rather useful for the people who live there. Yet monitoring pizza orders isn't even the most unorthodox way of predicting the outbreak of war. Historically, predicting revolution or war was always a secretive project, for the simple reason that any reliable prediction would be too valuable to share, especially for the military. The predictions were mostly made by specialized teams of experts, sifting through and correlating data points and troop movements, political statements, and other forms of intelligence to identify potential flashpoints. But starting in the 2010s, the combination of booming social media and powerful data processing software saw a new generation of open-source prediction models emerge. And some of those automated systems seem to do a better job of predicting the start of war than the teams of experts trying to do so manually. In the US, the story of automated conflict prediction started in the 1990s at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is regarded as the Pentagon's R&D wing. DARPA wanted to see if software-based approaches could better anticipate which governments might collapse shortly, better than the CIA analysts' manual approach. They looked at 29 different countries in Asia with populations over 500,000 and asked a simple question: will any of these countries' governments face an acute existential threat in the next 6 months? The CIA analysts achieved roughly 60% accuracy, but DARPA's system, using algorithms based on simple regression analysis, hit 80%, a marked improvement. DARPA dubbed their system IQs, the Integrated Conflict Early Warning System, and promptly hustled it out of public view into the shadowy depths of the Pentagon. There, it has no doubt been upgraded into a much more comprehensive system over the years. In addition, it's extremely likely that with the onset of AI and neural networks, even more sophisticated and accurate systems have been or are being built. But database prediction models haven't just been flourishing behind closed doors. Around 2009, Duke University's Ward Labs started using software to predict conflicts with relative success. For example, in their 2014 semi-annual predictions report, they correctly predicted a Marxist insurgency in Paraguay and an uptick in violence by China against their Uyghur minority, but missed the Maidan and the beginning of the civil war in Ukraine. However, that project seems to have been shelved. The Ward Labs today mainly focused on waste management. But the project's initiator, Professor Michael D. Ward, continues his lifelong work in the field of conflict dynamics at the consultancy Predictive Heuristics. The company uses a combination of split population modeling, multi-level modeling, and ensemble Bayesian model averaging to predict conflict outbreaks. Another noteworthy academic contribution to conflict prediction was the Predicting Armed Conflict 2010-2050 paper, published by Norwegian political scientist Havard Hegre and his team in 2013. Using predictors from the UN World Population Prospects and the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, they anticipated changes in global and regional incidences of armed conflict for the period 2010 to 2050. A follow-up study in 2021 found that Hegre et al.'s model was able to produce meaningful and reasonably accurate predictions of armed conflict. However, the model was much better at predicting the outbreak of large conflicts than smaller ones, and failed to predict some important broader regional shifts. More recently, in 2020, the Alan Turing Institute in the UK unveiled a new conflict prediction system that fuses a massive global dataset and traditional statistical analysis tools with AI. They claim that their system, called Global Urban Analytics for Resilient Defense, or GARD for short, achieved 82 to 94% accuracy in which peaceful regions will erupt into conflict and which conflicted regions will find peace. Moreover, it could predict these events 12 months in advance. GARD has partnered with the UK Department of Defense and the UN and is one of the most prominent public-facing conflict prediction models in use today. But none of these methods have the mystique or quirkiness of watching pizza trends in DC, which some think is an even more effective method and has been for decades. The basic idea behind the theory is simple. Under normal circumstances, Pentagon staff work normal hours and follow predictable work and recreational patterns. For example, most will leave work at the end of the workday, causing a drop in food orders to the Pentagon, and a spike in activity at nearby bars and restaurants, as some staff choose to go out for a meal or a few drinks after work. However, when something serious is about to happen, like the US about to launch an attack somewhere, many staff are compelled to stay at the office later into the night. And what sustains them during these marathon sessions of waiting, strategizing, and monitoring developments? Pizza, naturally. A significant increase in pizza deliveries to the Pentagon and a drop in activity at venues around the Pentagon frequented by staffers in the evening is thus a pretty good indicator that a major event is coming. But how does the process work? Ideally, you'd identify 3 to 5 food delivery establishments within 2 miles of the target facilities. You then monitor their busy indicators on Google Maps during consistent periods, typically 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. weekdays. Before attempting predictive analysis, you then need to establish a set of baseline data, say the previous 3 months' data. The next step is to cross-reference these delivery patterns with local entertainment venues frequented by military personnel. This data from bars, restaurants, and social clubs will provide inverse correlation data, i.e. when deliveries spike, social venue traffic typically drops proportionally. Historically, when these various factors align, the Pentagon Pizza Index has a 70 to 75% accuracy rate in predicting the outbreak of hostilities. That's not as accurate as GARD, and the signal only becomes visible a few days before the event, whereas GARD claims to predict the onset of war a year in advance. However, if you combine Pizza Index data with other geopolitical contexts like troop deployments and political statements, accuracy rates increase. One interesting aspect of the phenomenon is why pizza deliveries are the ideal indicator, as opposed to, say, burgers or sushi deliveries. As the Washington Post put it back in 1998, the bigger the crisis and the more time that government staffers hole up in their offices, the more pizza they eat. While there are a variety of food establishments within the Pentagon complex, there are no pizza places. And as multiple studies have shown, when people are stressed, they crave calorie-dense comfort food like pizza. Stress typically triggers the release of cortisol, a hormone that increases appetite and cravings for high-fat, high-calorie foods like pizza. These foods often have a feedback effect that dampens stress-related responses and emotions, leading to the designation comfort foods. Additionally, the act of eating can serve as a coping mechanism, providing a sense of control or distraction from stresses. That's especially true when munching through something as enjoyable to devour as pizza. In fact, over and above a spike in pizza deliveries, the pizza toppings themselves might provide clues as to just how major the events about to take place might be. According to Frank Meeks, previous owner of dozens of Domino's pizza franchises that get the call when things go wrong, Pentagon staffers take comfort in more grease, so orders of meat and other greasy toppings like extra cheese go up. To illustrate the point, extra cheese orders grew by 32% during the 1998 impeachment crisis of former President Bill Clinton, which we'll talk about more later. The phenomenon was first noted in 1983, on the eve of the US's invasion of Grenada. This controversial operation, dubbed Operation Urgent Fury, was carried out in conjunction with the Caribbean nations of Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. These nations had requested the US to intervene to resolve the violent political crisis gripping Grenada at the time. Although denounced by the UN General Assembly, the operation was a success. It resulted in the recovery of almost 600 Americans stuck on the crisis-stricken island in good health, which was President Ronald Reagan's stated objective. It also resulted in the removal of the military council that had executed Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and seized power in the preceding days, which prompted the crisis in the first place. Democratic elections followed and relative stability has endured, but on the eve of the invasion, October 24th, pizza deliveries to the Pentagon doubled from their normal levels and remained at elevated levels for the following 3 days as the operation unfolded. The same thing happened in 1989 when the US invaded Panama. This operation, dubbed Operation Just Cause, was primarily intended to oust Panamanian President Manuel Noriega, who had been indicted in the US on drug trafficking charges. The operation was on a larger scale, involving 27,000 US forces and 16,000 Panamanian forces. Ultimately, as could be expected, the Panamanians didn't stand a chance. The army was defeated, and Noriega surrendered himself after initially holding up inside the Vatican embassy. Once again, on the eve of the operation, December 19, 1989, pizza deliveries to the Pentagon doubled from their normal level. and remained at elevated levels during the fortnight on which the operation was taking place. But it was 8 months later when the phenomenon reached the broader public's attention. Delivery staff at various Domino's pizza outlets in and around Washington claimed that they had learned to anticipate big news about to emerge from the White House or the Pentagon if there was an upsurge in delivery orders. According to the Domino's staff, phones usually start ringing off the hook some 72 hours before an official announcement. In an interview in Time, one driver stated that on July 31, 1990, "We got a lot of orders starting around midnight. We figured something was up." Why is that date significant? Well, 3 days later, Iraq invaded Kuwait, ultimately leading to Operation Desert Storm, also known as the Gulf War. By the time Desert Storm kicked off on January 17, 1991, the correlation between Pentagon pizza delivery volumes and imminent military action had become mainstream news. As the operation launched, the Chicago Tribune published an account by Meeks, who owned 43 Domino's pizza franchises in DC at the time. Meeks claimed he was able to predict that military action was imminent thanks to spikes in his sales. In the 10 days prior to the invasion, he said, deliveries had risen from 3 to 101 per night, with 55 delivered between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. on January 16th alone. The record for deliveries to the CIA was 21, set the night before Iraq invaded Kuwait. The news reportedly prompted CNN's Wolf Blitzer, a Pentagon correspondent at the time, to observe, "Bottom line for journalists, always monitor the pizzas." By the mid-1990s, monitoring pizza deliveries had become a fun way of gauging public attention to major news events. During O.J. Simpson's famous slow-speed police chase in the summer of '94, Domino's Pizza reported record-breaking sales. Conversely, also according to Domino's, not a single person in the country ordered a pizza from them during the 5 minutes the Simpson verdict was read out the following year. Domino's actually created a largely tongue-in-cheek annual report called the Pizza Meter, based on delivery driver polls. In these reports, you could find unusual statistical nuggets like people who answered the door wearing polyester ordered 9% more vegetarian pizzas than those sporting natural fibers. We're not making that up, it's an actual stat from the 1995 report. But besides this broader, more light-hearted usage of pizza delivery volumes for statistical purposes, Pentagon pizza deliveries were still proving to be a surprisingly useful indicator of imminent action. Soviet intelligence officers operating within the US reportedly starting watching Pentagon pizza delivery numbers as an indicator of exactly that, dubbing the process PITSINT, short for Pizza Intelligence. It's unclear whether the Soviets ever gleaned any meaningful information from PITSINT, but in 1998, Pentagon pizza deliveries were again making mainstream news, from December 16th through 19th, as Meeks, now the owner of 60 Domino's franchises in the DC area, told the Washington Post, "It's going haywire." The trigger, this time, was twofold. The first was what Meeks dubbed the impeachment, the start of the impeachment hearings against Clinton. The second was the onset of Operation Desert Fox, the large-scale bombing operation against Iraq conducted by the US and UK. Critics at the time suggested that Clinton had launched the operation in part to distract attention from his impeachment hearings, but whether that was true or not, Domino's sales to the Pentagon over the 3-day period spiked almost 6 times, from around $2,600 to $3,100. Armand's, another pizza delivery place popular with Pentagon staff, also reported a 3.5 times increase in deliveries to the Pentagon on the evening before the operation began, from around $600 on a typical Wednesday to around $2,000 in the same period. Fast forward to the 2020s and the phenomenon of Pentagon pizza deliveries foreshadowing major conflict has gone viral once more. These days, with so much real-time data about food deliveries and venue fill rates publicly available, there's a bit more science to the process and even a semi-formal term for the model, the Pentagon Pizza Index. The main online source tracking and reporting on the Pentagon pizza sphere is the anonymous X account Pentagon Pizza Report. The account uses live, GPS-based customer tracking on Google Maps to monitor traffic at food delivery outlets near the Pentagon, White House, and CIA HQ, and nearby establishments popular with Pentagon staff. The account's tracking is then supplemented with crowdsourced data from subscribers, adding additional data points from establishments in the area not tracked by the original account. In April 2024, the Pentagon Pizza Index observed a spike in deliveries and other unusual food-related activity around the Pentagon. The spike perfectly foretold Iran's attack on Israel in retaliation for Israel's bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria. 5 months later, in September, unusual pizza delivery activity was also recorded just before Israel assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, Lebanon. The following month, in October, the index was again flashing signs of imminent action. This time, it correctly predicted Iran's True Promise 2 operation, in which Iran bombed Israel in retaliation for Israel's assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in July of the same year. However, arguably the most noteworthy and viral example of the Pentagon Pizza Index at work came on the evening of June 13, 2025. On that night, Freddy's Beach Bar experienced unusually low traffic, while nearby pizza joints recorded massive delivery spikes, a sure sign something major was about to take place. And later that night it did. Israel launched an attack on Iran. Freddy's Beach Bar is located in Arlington, Virginia, less than 1 mile from the Pentagon's southwest perimeter. As the closest gay bar to the Pentagon, it serves a specific demographic of military and intelligence personnel, creating a focused sample for behavioral analysis. Because it's so close to the Pentagon, even minor traffic variations carry amplified significance, transforming casual social patterns into valuable intelligence indicators. On the evening of June 13th, Google Maps real-time data showed that Freddy's was conspicuously empty and that there was decreased foot traffic at multiple other Arlington entertainment venues. Simultaneously, both Domino's and Papa John's near the Pentagon reported unusually high delivery order volumes, much greater than typical Thursday patterns, which started an hour before Israel's missile strikes began. Users on the Pentagon Pizza Report on X provided additional confirmation of delivery surges that aligned perfectly with the reduced nightlife activity. This multi-source validation strengthens the intelligence assessment beyond coincidental correlation. Admittedly, taken as a solitary data point, an increase in pizza deliveries to the Pentagon may be purely coincidental. There might be a large-scale scheduled planning session that stretches into dinner time, necessitating a large delivery order. There might be a birthday celebration at the office or a big game on TV that a bunch of staffers decide to enjoy together at work. But combined and correlated with other data points, pizza deliveries can be a crucial indicator of imminent large-scale events unfolding. Tracking delivery apps, social media reports, and real-time traffic data is one of the most effective ways available today to create a comprehensive picture of operational tempo without classified access. To date, there's little evidence that a similar phenomenon to the Pentagon Pizza Index has been observed in other countries, or whether pizza deliveries will be the best indicator outside the US. Perhaps a Kremlin vodka index or Turkish kebab index might be just as revealing, or perhaps military staffers there also prefer diving into the ultimate comfort food, pizza, when the heat is on. It would certainly be interesting to analyze, and perhaps this data would be as reliable an indicator of imminent hostilities emanating from those nations as pizza deliveries are in DC. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for many more interesting and unusual military-focused videos. Thank you for watching.